Hi, folks. Can everybody hear me? We're going to go ahead and get our program started, but feel free to help yourselves. Grab a drink at the bar. Plenty of food. Thanks to Continue Golf for wonderful coffee service today. Very nice. All the way from Denver. Our president. We're looking forward to that. That's great to do that. Here. By the way, let's do just a show of hands on students. How many students do we have here? Four. Number. John is with B3 Company. Here's a list of our current officers and others that help out. I think you probably know everybody there. You've met Aipg, myself, Eric, Anna. We're all here. A couple of names on the officers at large. Down low there is James Schmidt. He's our Indiana contact. He lives north side of Indianapolis, and he's one of the main people over there, and Zach Dearman as well. So I know he's on spring break. Didn't expect him to make the trip over, but sometimes he gets over. Martin Hamper, past president. Dave Piles, past president. Harvey's here tonight. Tim Norris is a new addition to the board as well. There you go. Just a few announcements. Upcoming meetings. Of course, Marquette, Michigan. 2022 national meeting is coming up in August. If you've ever been to Marquette, you generally want to go back. It's such a gorgeous area up there. I think Dave Hygoff put a list of the field trips on the table over there. If you're interested, they have those scheduled. It should be a great time. Hope you can all make the trip up and join us. Michigan section, of course, is very, very active. They'll be involved. I'm sure it'll be a spectacular conference. The 2023 conference is the 60th anniversary of Aipg. That is in Covington, Kentucky, and it's a tri-state sponsored event. So the Illinois, Indiana, the Ohio. Analyze very thoroughly what the field trips will be like. They'll be excellent. You know, something new about the field trips, we're going to videotape, what's tape? We're going to video a field trip, and it will be available beforehand. we're looking forward to that. The Michigan section is so go online, contact Michigan if you're interested in this one, but it's a great workshop. We're also working on, do we have anybody from Aipg? I haven't seen, yes, of course. All right. So we're working with Christopher Storr, the chairman, and these fine folks here, on working on joint field trips. So those are in the works. Of course, our section will be looking at trying to get back into field trips as well. As the students will attest, student membership is free. List of our current student chapters: EIU, IUPUI, NIU, and all kinds of acronyms there that we've already established, and those that we're working on for future student chapters. Augustana, Tim, there he is. All State University, that's one of Shane Smith's targets in Indiana. UIUC, that's Anna and David Heidloff. We can call it David Heidloff. One of the things new members can do, or anybody really, one way you can help out in the section, if you went to a school that has a geoscience department, and you think they might like to have a student chapter, you could be the kind of the key. We held the vision, what we call our vision together, members come together, any interested parties, anybody who wants to join in, and sit. Who we want to be as a section, how can we serve the membership better, how can we serve the students and generate more student outreach, and a number of other topics for a 2-hour meeting. We'll nail down the date in the coming week and send that out to everybody. Scheduling for mid-May. But again, the more people that can be there, the more ideas shared. And we're looking for every board member to bring somebody along. So at least one visitor, if not more, and maybe get some ideas, get to know the board and the officers, and join in and help us out. We'll also be holding elections this year for 2023. We would love to hear anybody that would like to step up and respond to. We'll be looking at a number of positions there. Again, we just want to see more from the membership, more interaction. Joining us like that. I'm gonna turn this over to Anna, and she's gonna give the treasurer's report, and we've got a couple of other things to throw out there as well.
This is nap time. Hey everybody, make it out. No income during that time, and we have 3 expenditures, one to partially fund our section to the national meeting, and also section sponsorship of the national meeting, and our deposit for our venue here tonight, which is well worth it, I think. Awesome spot. Yeah, ending cash balance as of March 31st at $60,912.51. All right, we just wanted to take a real quick minute. Who's a vendor? Raise your hand. Jeff just left. No, Jeff. They all went to take a nap. I was going to have them introduce themselves, but they missed out.
Eco Rental, Lombard.
Yeah, definitely. Back there.
No.
Stand up and introduce yourself.
Come on now.
Or whoever you guys want.
The trifecta here. Peggy, who just started with us recently. Dave Lanzolas came all the way from Ohio just to see us.
Welcome. Thanks, guys.
So, I'm Bernie Esselman. I been working in Chicago area. I'm from Wisconsin, but I've worked in the area for about 10 years now. I've been in the industry for about 26.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. I think most of us are pretty familiar with Test America and now Eurofins. So thanks. I was just doing vendor minutes. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Well, hello, it's great to see everybody. It's good to be out. Jeff Dutton, I'm with Eco Rental Solutions. We are a provider of equipment for monitoring and sampling, rental, sales, service, and repair. We do a great job with customer service, new equipment, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
What else did I miss? I know those are two of them. So Dave Heidloff is our current section vice president, and he's also currently treasurer for Aipg National. And excitement, he's a candidate for Aipg National Vice President next year. So we know where our vote's going.
So, just a couple things tonight, besides making another trip. I think exciting, nationally, for anybody that hasn't attended, the way this upcoming one will be structured, with the business, the board on Saturday. One of the best things for the national meeting is exposure. This year, instead of 2 days of technical meetings, we're only we're going to have field trips on Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesday and Wednesday. So there's bookend field trips. They're doing the pricing a little bit different. The announcement came out yesterday on the TPG, which is available online, and then hard copies will be mailed. But they're doing package pricing, which should be, I think, a little more attractive. But it's 6-7 hour drive, and it should really be good. Second thing I'd like to put out the word is our organization is grading membership. Put in for their CPGs, and this isn't something we spoke about at our meeting, but it's one of the values that Aipg can offer certified professional geologists who need 7 years experience to get the accreditation. For myself, I have it. I have 25 years, and for me, it's useful for my CV, but for when I'm in litigation. But it's something that if you're interested, talk to Craig or we will help you with applications before Matt's footsteps. Matt started his career, I learned a little bit tonight, he did some after grad school mud logging for a couple of years, and then he delved into the environmental field. And then, like many of us have a circuitous path for our careers, we ended up in mining. So he's had a diverse career that's not atypical for geologists. I was with my wife in Central Park a couple months ago, sitting on a nice outcrop, trying to find a speaker for tonight. And I thought of my friend Matt, pulled out my phone, and invited Matt to attend. But Matt is this year's Aipg national president, and I think before he gives his talk on goals exploration, he probably has words he'd like to share for the initiatives of national and some of his initiatives that he'd like to celebrate. So Matt, please welcome.
I have a presentation, of course, to queue up. And
You want me to grab the clicker or it's on the clicker? Yeah, either yell or hold the mic, whichever you'd rather.
Yeah, comes off.
Most geologists have no voice.
I just want to give you a brief. Oh, I don't do microphones really well. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Okay. I just want to give you a real quick overview of the things that are in the works, some of the initiatives we have underway at headquarters and different communities, committees that we have that are working on a bunch of different things within the organization. But I will tell you that the one thing that is paramount, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, and I really don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it all comes down to membership. If we don't do that right, then everything else becomes immaterial. And we've not been doing it right for a long, long time. I was the treasurer for 2 years, and every quarter I would see the numbers are down. The treasurer before me would see for 8 quarters the numbers are down. Dave Heideloff is seeing every quarter the numbers are down. It's untenable, it's unsustainable. The whole business model will have to change if we stay on this trajectory. But what I'd like to do is get us off this trajectory, start breathing some new air into the dynamic of who we are, what we do, how we accomplish things, and kind of shift gears, get out of the lower gears. And so everything that we're doing gets appraised through the prism of how will this benefit our membership and how will this improve the organization. And so some of this is we're looking at a lot of return on our investment when we show up at conferences and webinars and seminars, et cetera, et cetera. We want to see payback from that. We don't want to go and have a good time and hand out a bunch of stuff and lots of happy talk. We want new members. And so that should be the imperative. That's the objective for everything we do. If we're not doing that, then we're doing something wrong, right? So that comes down to a head count of we need 176 new members every year to tread water. That's to tread water. But we really need 220 to 250 to grow and put us on a healthy trajectory. We're not there. Right now we have 16 that are in the mill as we speak, with another 4 came in last week, so that looks good, but really we need to get above those numbers. And so how do we do that? Well, we've got a bunch of different ideas of how we might embark on that. But some of them are different learning opportunities and or short courses. And 2 questions, just show of hands. How many of you are active GSA members and regularly go to GSA conferences? Excellent. How many of you use GIS in what you do? It's a little healthier. Okay. A couple of examples of what we're looking at is offering a QGIS. QGIS is a public domain. QGIS software class for geologists, only for Aipg members. I just took a class through the Tulsa Geologic Society. It was a 4-week class for $200. I really, and that class filled with limited to 30 people, and it filled in 3 days. If we opened up to all of our membership, we could do that, make it maybe an 8-week class, and do it again and again and again and again. And people have asked me, should we do this through GOLI, G-O-L-I, through the AGI and everything else? Hell no. Let's take full ownership of it, keep the money ourselves, pay the instructor, and grow our membership. But in the process, provide more value, tractable, tenable, palpable value to our members. Another one is we just inked an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with the Irish Geologic Survey. I don't understand it. Well, great geology over there, lots and lots of green rocks. But the thing is that why did we do that? Why would we do that? Well, one of them is our executive director did his PhD work over there. He's been there, I think, 16 times. Well, I say, why don't we leverage the bejeebers out of that and do a road trip? Why don't we have a head count of 10 to 20 people go, and it wouldn't be cheap. It wouldn't be on the cheap because it's a once in a lifetime experience, assuming you only go once. But it wouldn't be on the cheap. This is not something we're going to offer for like Earl Scheib, $49.95. It'll be a big ticket. But that's as a revenue generator. And the whole story of MOUs. Why do we do MOUs just for the sake of doing MOUs? We have them with a bunch of different organizations. Why? Why would I have an MOU with the state of Louisiana if I'm not planning on doing something with the state of Louisiana? Well, right now we're in discussions with SME about the potential for an MOU, and we're just kind of at the happy talk stage. And I've been a long time member of SME. They abandoned geologists decades ago. There hasn't been a good geology article in SME Rec for a long time. But they married this underground construction and tunneling group, and that's been a good fit for them, and it's been very profitable. That group's they're based in Denver just like we are. And so there's the potential for a lot of synergy, but they're huge. They're much bigger than this. And I don't just want to be somehow subsumed in that larger organization that's dominated by engineers. So we want something that's going to come out of that would work well for us. If we're doing Ireland, we might as well do Canada, we might as well do Mexico. Great geology up in the Canadian Rockies, spectacular. Great geology down in Mexico. And so those are the types of things that we're looking at to kind of grow come out of our bubble and see what we can do to diversify who we are, what we're doing, where we're going, how we're growing. And the thing about ROI on outreach activities, the return on our investment, we've been going to a lot of things that we're comfortable with. We just went to the Cordillera section of the GSA in Las Vegas. But my experience, and I belonged to that organization for a long time, GSA is populated by a lot of academic people and students running around with resumes. That's not our target audience. You are our target audience. You, the people you run with, the people you work with, the people that are down the hall and around the corner from you, that's the cohort we want to target. So we want to be talking to, one of them is Aipg. They look like us, they walk like us, they talk like this, and they're all geologists. Well, there's a boatload of geologists, a lot of engineers, but environmental people. But it would, so we're going to be talking to them in Las Vegas this fall. And other organizations where we're going to get more bang for our buck for sending people there because somebody can walk by who's already qualified. They might already be ASBOG registered in their home state or neighboring states or what have you. They've already got 10 years of professional experience under their belt. They can join us with a signature. Bada boom, bada bing, you're in. And that's what we want is to make, and I hate to use the term low-hanging fruit, but people who are more like us. We want to go after people who are like us. Now that is not to throw any shade on the notion of students and student population. We can't turn our back on those folks and that whole cohort because we have to attract them. We've got to keep them coming in the door. But the simple reality is from a person who's a junior at a university anywhere to them becoming a CPG, dues paying, card carrying, et cetera, that's an 8-year timeline, okay? And we don't have 8 years. We've got 2 or 3, okay? And the reason I say that, if we don't turn around and reverse trend on the where we are with our revenue, there's a couple of different ways to skin this cat, and one is we can embark on the same model that Aipg has, meaning they don't really have headquarters. They have an organization in Ohio, New Brunswick, Ohio? Ohio. They have an organization, and this organization provides professional home office services for all these different 501c3s. So it might be a nursing association, it might be, I don't know, pediatric, what have you, but AEG is one of them, and so they do that for a fee. So your magazine didn't come, you want the new t-shirt, you want to join up for that field trip, you want to do, they take care of all of that, which is what Wendy Davidson and Kathy Duran and Christy Valero and all the people in headquarters, that's what they do for us. But if we can't reverse the trend, we won't be able to afford a headquarters, and we'll have to outsource that. And I really wouldn't want to oversee that downscaling, downsizing kind of initiative, right? It's just, it runs against my DNA. So at any rate, I'm more prone to growth, not just treading water, but and this will show you one of the inherent problems with 1-year presidencies is Wendy Davidson, who's been with us 20 plus years, says, why don't we have a membership drive? We should have a membership drive. No, well, yeah, what does that look like? Nobody's ever, I mean, I'm 30 years with this organization, Michael, never participated in a membership drive. Oh, well, 38 states in the union, licensed geologists, register them, whatever you, and they keep lists of every one of those people. And the way they went about it is they would pick Kentucky, they would pick Wyoming, get that list, and then bombard every one of those members who's already ASBOG certified with correspondence of, we'd like you to join Aipg. Well, that doesn't even sound difficult. That sounds like something we should have been doing this time 6 years ago. But that whole initiative died on the vine. Everybody forgot about it, and now there's nobody around who remembers it at all. But it's those types of things we're going to have to revisit. And I'll give you a really good example. I just got this in the mail a couple days ago. Membership directory for Geologic Society in Nevada. They don't license geologists in Nevada, but every geologist in the state wants to be in this book because, especially, primarily be a QP, a qualified professional. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But in order to be a qualified professional working in the mining business, such that you can stamp reports, essentially, CPG. The Canadian Securities Exchange, and the Canadians are running the mining business, either out of Vancouver, Toronto. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The only certification they recognize in the U.S. for a geologist is a CPG. That's it. The fact that you're registered in Louisiana or Kentucky or wherever holds no weight with them because they want a national license. You might very well be licensed someplace else, but because they don't license them in Nevada, you got to be a CPG, which is why we have so many members in Nevada that are CPGs, and why we'll be at the Geologic Symposium next month for the Geologic Society in Nevada. And we'll have a very strong presence there to try and recruit more people to our ranks. Everybody wants to be one of these, and it's a real easy sell. I've talked to 3 different individuals out there. Hey, have you ever considered that? It's not that big a deal. And it's not, when I talk to people about it, I'm not selling timeshares. I'm not selling aluminum siding. I'm not trying to sell you a warranty for your vehicle. I'm trying to sell you something I really do believe in. And I think all of us as geologists, we benefit from having more and more initials after our name. We have a guy in Ohio, Brent Smith. He's got like 19 initials after. I don't even know what they all are, but he's got every one but E-I-E-I-O. But he, I think what I would like to see, the way I would like us to grow along the curve is You take a shop like WSP or AECom or Stantec or Jacobs or Golder or Kleinfelder, all of them, and you inculcate and grow a culture there where the senior players that are geologists, they're all CPGs. And the new people coming in the door know, 5 years in the pipe, that's who I want to be. And they all know that, and that's the culture, because the PEs do it in every engineering discipline. The engineers have it down. That's what they do. It's just part of it, and they got to have those stamps. So I want to have us. There is no competition in this regard, other than state level. Have us playing in those waters. Okay. So does all that make sense? Okay. So that's where we are. But ROI on our outreach activities. It used to be there was a lot of international travel, and they say, oh, the European Federation's having their annual meeting in Azores this year. I said, oh, great. None of us are going to Azores. No, we've got a finite amount of money to spend, and when you get to our integrity, responsibility, blah, blah, it's how we spend your money, my money, how we do this. We need to be necessarily downright frugal. And we do run a pretty lean shop. But the reason I feel very strongly about this is I've been in meeting after meeting after meeting, and people thought, this is somebody else's problem. Somebody else is going to come along and fix this and make it all right. No, nobody's coming along. It's you. It's all of you. And just one person, can you imagine one person, you talk to one person in the next few months, there's thousands of pieces of paperwork, tanto a pronto. Sign, 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 okay? Does that make sense? So, sorry, broken record, membership, okay?
I think you should be good to go with the clicker.
Oh, excellent. Now it's me.
I believe so. It's all you.
I have a bunch of things to cover in this presentation, but I'll tell you one thing that's really, the Ruby Hill District in Eureka, Nevada is out in the middle of nowhere. By definition, it's way out there. And it's so far out there that it happens to be the loneliest road in America. It's another 100 miles to the next little town that doesn't have a gas station or a traffic light. But geologic road logs, they got them all. If you want to start out in Delta, Utah and drive all the way on US 50 to, say, Reno, you got this, or vice versa, go east to west or west to east. You got a very great log for that. This goes right through Eureka. And on this project, this is kind of serendipitous. There's a new book that came out in October of last year, A Slice Through America, a Geological Atlas. The whole book, why somebody didn't think of this decades ago, I don't know. The whole book is geologic cross-sections. Really cool stuff. And just, very, very well done. Mind maps, all kinds of really, and I look at cross-sections as kind of an art form, but our project's right on the front cover. Wait a minute. So everybody on the project got this book, and there's a whole series of sections that go through the project right there in the Ruby Hill District. Now let's get on with it. The Ruby Hill Mine. Now this dates back to actually the 1860s when they discovered polymetallic deposits there, lead zinc with silver and gold and some copper complements, but they didn't know the metallurgy to free it up. And so it took them a long time to work that out. And eventually it was so prolific, there were 7 smelters in town, and the thing just went gangbusters. But it took them a long time to work through that. And I'll show you this is looking north, and this is looking north out into the Diamond Valley. The Diamond Range is over here in the fog. There's the head frame for the FAD shaft. We'll talk about that in a little minute. The power works, water tower. Water's a big driver in the whole program. Basically looking north. Basically looking blank. Here's the FAD shaft in 1950. There's still, the shaft itself is excavated to a depth of 2,500 feet. That's a big dog deal, 2,500 feet underground. When you pace it off, 2,500 feet isn't that far. But vertically, it's 2 Empire State Buildings. So it's a big, big structure. Took them 3 years to build. And they may actually be still building it when this photo is taken. But here you can see the Diamond Range out on the horizon. And it's classic textbook basin and range topography, which we'll get into a little bit more here in a minute. Here's what the head frame looks like today. It's 65 feet tall. Here you see we got a Ford F-150 sitting out there. There's our fuel tanker in the foreground. And you can see the wind has been relentless in peeling that corrugated siding off of those buildings out there. It never relents. The wind wins every argument. But there you can see the Diamond Range out on the horizon. And we're at, right here, the shaft is at 6,900 feet elevation. The bottom of the valley, Diamond Valley, gets down to about 6,000 feet. And actually, oddly enough, there's a lot of water in the system, a lot of water in the valley. One of the few locations in Nevada where they have center pivot irrigation, and lots of it. The original powerhouse is these big diesel generators. This thing's about the size of a school bus, and you see the electrical components to generate the armature for generating the juice in that. This building has 3 of these things, and just the notion that somewhere after the turn of the century, just to get these engine blocks up there, it's just a phenomenal. I can't imagine working in there when those things were running, because they're about the size of a school bus. They're big, and just honestly, parts of the facility looks like they just laid down their gloves and walked away from it. And this is where I really do pander to the audience, because these are some compressors. And this, I'm used to Ingersoll Rand making really, really big industrial compressors, but you'll notice that little logo there. I'm talking about literally pandering to the locals. That's Chicago Pneumatic. They've been an air company that's been around. They're one of Chicago's oldest industrial companies. They still make hand tools, power tools, industrial compressors of every way, shape, and form. And they've got 3 of them out there. So that's the stuff that's still in some of the engine houses and the facilities that are out there. The Archimedes pit is I-80 Gold. Just bought this little I-80, just like the interstate. They just bought this from Waterton. They're our neighbor to the north, not even a mile. And here you can see a better view of the Diamond Valley out here. This is US Highway US 50 that goes right through here, exits the valley at a little area called Devil's Gate. This is Highway 278 that goes due north up to Carlin. And you've probably all heard of the severe orogeny out there and the antler orogeny, and these are the Roberts Mountains. And the Roberts Mountains is the Roberts Mountain Alachthon. That's Alachthonous terrain that was brought in from the west. So we're in the foreland of that thrust belt, and we're actually on a pressure ridge, a foreland bulge, if you will, that's in front of the thrust zone. Eureka is very historic. Got some it's a neat little town. It puts off a very good vibe. A lot of towns in Nevada do not. But it's historic stuff, old mining district, big piles of slag all around, because they did have, at one time, 7 or 8 smelters that worked there. And so they got, a historic museum, historic opera house, the old city hall, the Jackson House, which you can still stay there. Really, really cool. Neat old buildings. Oh, and because we're reaching out to the capital markets for money, that's what we do. We raise money. I have to have a forward-looking statement. And what is a forward-looking statement? In the fine print, it's caveat emptor, which is buyer beware. I'm here to talk you out of your money. I'm a swindler. Don't trust anything I say. In fact, I didn't even use it for this company. This is for a company I used to own in the past, United Battery Metals, which was a vanadium company. But we've used this before, that if you can catch that typo on line 17, we'd like to talk to you about our data. Rain Man, after the presentation. But the outline for this, very straightforward. Where we are, what the stratigraphy looks like, the geology, a little bit of discussion, sidebar on the drilling dynamic. Hydrogeology is a big program driver out there. I'll walk you through the BRIAC scandal very quickly, and how does this tie into what people do environmentally, because they're very, very strong parallels. What we do planning-wise for these programs, and wrap it up at the tail end of that. So here we are out in the middle of Nevada. Great Basin National Park's right on the Nevada-Utah state line, just due east of us here. 50 goes all the way across the state. Boy, this didn't fit here very well. Oh, we're only 1.8 miles outside of town, which is really anomalous in Nevada. To be, I mean, I can go into town for a cup of coffee, I can go into town for a sandwich. Most projects, it's very common. Projects are an hour out of town, hour and a half out of town. It's not uncommon. The one I came from down to Tonopah was an hour and 45 minutes each way. And that's where your ultimate risk is on these projects. It's not on the project site, it's on the highway coming and going. It really is, always will be. Middle of nowhere, but the state's about 400 miles wide. It's 4 hours to Reno due west, which is the closest airport. It's 5 up to Salt Lake. There's our little circuitous 1.8 miles outside of Eureka, all paved and maintained by the county. Every time I pull this slide up, I don't know what to expect because it only shows it to me in black and white. The strat column there, we got 7,000 feet of Cambrian, and we're only in the Cambrian. We're only working the Cambrian out there. Some of the other mines that have been successful have actually gone up into the Ordovician Pogonip, which is just above us, and the Windfall, just above us where we're working. But we're down in the big actors for us. Go back. The big actors for us are at the bottom of the column, down in the El Dorado Formation, right at the top of the Eldo. That's where we have what's called a carbonate replacement deposit, where really, really aggressive solutions came in, extremely low pH, and attacked the carbonates there, both the limestones and the dolomites, and they replaced them on a molecule by molecule basis with sulfides. It's the strangest, a lot of copper porphyry deposits, different types of porphyry deposits, they vector into them by way of the geochemistry and what they're seeing in the surrounding rock. This stuff is really hard to find, and the deposits tend to be very, very large if your host rock unit is very, very thick, because they don't put off a big aureole. There's not a big alteration zone that's very easy to find. Sometimes the alteration zone extends out for miles. By the time you're really looking for it, you're already well into it and very, very close. And we've come up in core where the really super high grade stuff is immediately adjacent to unaltered dolomite, unaltered limestone. It's really wild, but there's some really good examples out there. The biggest one, part of the Bingham Pit in Utah, part of that is a CRD, carbonate replacement deposit. There's some big ones in Utah. I'm trying to think some of the largest ones in the country, but they're very, very high grade. And they tend now, I say they're not that deep. This one's at 2,500 feet by virtue of faulting and where we are on the downthrown side of a normal fault. But it's the Eldo. Up above, the Windfall Canyon, the Dunderberg, people have found stuff, but much smaller deposits, not as laterally extensive. But this one, we know the resources there. For a fact, we know it's there. So Nevada, one thing that's strange about it is you see all these folds and faults out there, and it's counterintuitive to think this area has been stretched east to west, phenomenally so, on the order of over 100 miles. And it's the thinnest crust of any place on the planet. That's why it's got serious geothermal anomalies all over the state. Hot springs everywhere, economically viable geothermal, all over the state. And some of it, you drive right by it on Interstate 80. But that's what that's what the basin fill, and you see how the mountains all trend north-south. There's a little bit of deviation there, but I mean, it's an overwhelming pattern that you can see what's going on. That's the story in the state. Very, very thin crust. So this is a cartoonish version, if you will, of our project. The area. This is the north end of the Fish Creek Range. One of these linear ranges I was just showing you. Little town of Eureka here. Our little FAD shaft. We got a shaft that's real close to us called the Locan shaft, and they're connected at the 800-foot level. But Ruby Hill, it's kind of a whole slew of misnomers here. That's the actual topographic feature of Ruby Hill. There was a community that when the mines were all going out there, that was also called Ruby Hill. The guys that are mining the Archimedes pit called it the Ruby Hill mine. And so when you're getting deliveries called out or what have you, people, I'm at Ruby Hill, oh, I know where you are. And no, actually you don't. So we always have to tell people we're at the original Ruby Hill, we're up on the hill, we're 900 feet above town, and but the nice thing is logistics are easy. Actually, logistics are really, really favorable. So that's kind of the simple version, a little higher resolution, just so you can see with the Ruby Hill fault over to the left. That's a normal fault, down dropped on the north side of that. It runs for about 3 miles. It crops for about 3 miles. Probably runs for 10 times that. But we're on the downthrown side of the block, and so what happened is when they first found Ruby Hill, they mined it at the surface, and the whole thing played out. They high graded it inside of 20 years, and they said, well, where's the rest of it? We got lots and lots of El Dorado out here. Where is it? And the thinking at that time was that the Ruby Hill fault acted as a barrier to the migrating fluids that carried the ore. And so if you went north of the fault, that was all going to be barren rock. There's nothing out there. Now the drilling techniques in the 1920s and 1930s, it would take them almost a year to get down to 2,500 feet, almost a year. And this is very difficult to ground drilling, and we'll show that in a minute. So it took them a long, long time, but then they found it. Sure enough, they could reproduce the stratigraphy, and boom, they were right back into it at a depth of 2,500 feet below their feet, which is cropping up right on the surface on the other side of the fault. So they proceeded to drill and drill and drill and drill and prove it out. And then while they were still drilling, they said, we know it's there. We know what it looked like on the other side of this fault. We're just going to put in this shaft and run with it from there. Here's just the overall fault patterns is that there's a whole slew of interconnected faults, interlinked faults that run north-south. And this is just the northern 5 or 6 miles of it. It runs north-south 30 miles. And so it's a very strong control on the mineralization, the alteration out there. But that's just to give you a feel of what was controlling the movement of liquids in the subsurface. And there's a lot of faults that are out there that don't crop, and you just run into them in the subsurface. And here we simplified profile of south to north, looking west. There's a granite. The heat engine for this thing is the Ruby Hill stock. It's a granodiorite plug. And you can see we're normally faulted on the north side, and the sequence of younger to older on this side. You can see right in through here where they originally hit it, and they were mining it at the surface, and then they followed it down the fault and then found it at depth. We are thinking that there's actually a stair-step motion on it, so that we can first find it at 2,500 feet, then maybe 27 or 28, then maybe 32, 33, and all really high-grade stuff. This is really, the vertical exaggeration on this is ridiculous. It's kind of out of control for geologic presentation purposes, but the maps just get that much more convoluted the more detailed they get. Here you can see the Locan and the FAD shafts very clearly. They drove the shaft down to 2,500 feet, but then they came out and started working the drifts off of it at 2,250, and that's where they got into the high-grade ore. They're connected at the 800-foot level, and so they've got a lot of definition on what's going on there. There's been a lot of modeling of this done, a lot of different structural domains, et cetera, et cetera. They really don't lend themselves well to presentations like this because you really need to rotate that model to get a good feel for it. And it looks like bubblegum stuck on a wall when you look at the models. But that's cross-section wise, that gives you a feel for what's there. And this is what our thinking is that at depth there might be another body down to the lower right that would warrant continued drilling, continued exploration. And one thing I'd point out, if you ever look at mine maps, mine cross-sections, overwhelmingly they're in the footwall of the structure and we're in the hanging wall. And I think there's more safety in working in the footwall than mining over in the hanging wall, but we're in the hanging wall because we don't have any choice. That's where the deposit is. But we're continuing to drill to prove this out. Now this is the drift that they built off of the shaft. And the shaft is over off to the right. And then they modeled, or they did the mapping. West face looking east, east face looking, west face looking west, east face looking west, which this was for external communication, obviously, because miners don't map this way. So clearly it was to go into some kind of external literature, but this is where they got really jammed up. They ran into a fault that they did not know was there. And what comes to mind is the Gold King project outside of Uray. What happened is they worked their way through this dense area of fault gouge, and it started bleeding. The rock started producing water, and not just kind of, sorta, really badly. So they were able to pump it, and they put in a kind of a locking vault door structure. The photos of it are really bad, so I don't share them. But to kind of lock it off and lock off water entering into the drift, so they could continue developing it. It overcame the drift, and it flooded the shaft up to 1,200 feet. So it filled that, and it did that in less than a week. There's no mortality or any of that, nothing scary other than, now you're in chest deep water, now it's time to get out, and it filled that up, and just all of that investment in today's dollars at the time, but and all of that underwater. The technology did not exist to dewater that, and the pumps and everything are still out there. The top head drives, all the bells, all of it, they're still out there. And the modeling that's been done says that they would need to, first off, they thought it came in at 76,000 GPM. They think to maintain a dynamic head and dewater the works, 30,000 gallons per minute. But that's 30,000 gallons a minute with a over 2,000 foot lift. That's not going to be cheap. But there's a bunch of mines in Nevada that are already doing that, and the technology exists. And so now there's things they can be doing with directional drilling and frozen structures such that they might be able to defeat it. The resources there that it would provide the economics for them to be thinking that way. So what we're doing out there is we're twinning a bunch of historic holes out there. Sounds easy, it is not. It's bad ground. It's very, very difficult, and the reason being there's so much anisotropy in the rheology of the rocks. Some of the rocks are sanded, they're just rotten literally to sand. You have highly contrasting dolomites as well as all these twisted up shales, and so it's not an easy push to keep your circulation and keep things working as you're getting the hole down in the ground. It sounds fairly straightforward, but we're going 2,500 feet, and so you want to get it within a finite area of the target at 2,500 feet, and it's so much easier said than done. So what happens is, and you'll see this on a lot of mine maps, invariably drill rigs turn to the right, and so drill holes deviate to the right. So they always get a little curved whipstock right down on the very tail end of them. we had one, this is one in 100, deviated to the left by a lot. I mean, we missed the target by 75 feet. That's an expensive hole. And the reason we think it got on a shear zone or got on a fracture zone, it just shattered that bit right down that anisotropy. And we lost it. No matter how hard you push, it's not going to go over here. It's going to follow that right on down. Which is now we do gyro surveys every 200 feet on the holes now, rather than finding out at the end of the hole that you're nowhere near where you wanted to be. So a little 5-minute sidebar on drilling. The objective is to put the rocks in the box, right? But you want to make sure the rocks are representative of whatever you're seeing in the subsurface. Sounds really easy, but people mash them up. I'm very fortunate on this project. We have a hydraulic extruder. They just call it a core press. So it comes right out of the barrel like it went into the barrel. And so no matter how bad the rock is, you get something that's fairly representative of that. And we all know this, no matter what field we're working in, whether it's groundwater, soil, or rock, you always want to have the representative sample to the fullest extent that you can. Minimal agitation and disturbance. The difference between diamond core drilling and what they call reverse RC drilling. Diamond core drilling is about 10 times the cost. It's about 8 to 10 times slower. Much more representative core sample. The way we're drilling this program is we start out with PQ core, which is a 3-inch core. The program calls for running that down to 1,500 feet, but that's a big diameter to keep moving down to that depth. And so a lot of times we get jammed up before we get there. I think the farthest we've ever run it has been about 1,200 feet. Then you downsize to HQ core. And HQ core is the international, that's what everybody uses. Aipg is what they call it down in Mexico. Everybody uses it. And that's a 2.25, 2.5 inch core. You just cement the barrel and then you run it down inside with a smaller diameter. The last that you can use is NQ. And I say NQ is like a big pencil. It's small stuff, but I think it's still 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. We've only had to extend it once, that we had telescope all the way down to the NQ. The other thing that people should know that anybody can, it doesn't take a lot of savvy to put a hole in the ground, okay? It's not that difficult. However, it is if you want it to go exactly where you want it to be, on the right azimuth and at the right inclination, because the bit will want to walk on you. And what people don't understand is you need to envision a drill rig as a vertical crane. It's holding everything in suspense. So as you add more and more drill string to that, the weight on the bit does not get heavier and heavier. It stays about constant. You want to keep it within a very narrow range. Because, I wish I had photos of this. If you continue to stack more and more weight on that bit, it will run hotter and hotter. Not only will you burn the bit, you could end up losing the hole. So at any rate, we have one very good example where a mud pump went out on a night crew and they didn't know they're drilling dry. And because their penetration rate has dropped off so badly, they're just standing on the bit that much harder. And little did they know that when the morning crew came out and said, "Hey, there's mud everywhere. Didn't you see your mud pump went out?" Well, that might explain why the bit's not working so well. And they tripped it out. And when you go in, you trip in. When you come out, you trip out. They tripped the bit out, and they had melted it. And so and because it had molten over the threads and everything else, they had to cut it off. And they said, "We're going to save this for show and tell for the night crew. Tell them what not to do. Then we're going to throw this right into the mud sump." I said, "Oh no, I'm taking that one home for my collection." And I'd love to share it with you because to see something that actually you can see by the time they were bringing it out through the water, it was dripping, but it was frozen right there. And it's just like molten bit. So my experiences have been that you learn so much on a drill rig. You learn so much about obtaining representative samples that sometimes really the driller's the smartest person out there. And there's just, you don't want to poo-poo that or somehow discount that. There's just fantastic opportunities to learn. Reverse circulation is, conventional circulation is where the water goes down through the center of the pipe, comes out the drill bit at the bottom, then comes up through the annulus, which is that cylindrical area between the drill string and the wall cage, okay? Reverse search is the exact opposite. You send it down the outside and it comes up through the drill string and then comes out to a venturi where you separate your solids from your water. Very different approaches, but reverse search does not generate a core, it generates chips. So you have a whole tray, chip tray that's got all these 5-foot compartments in it, and you just fill them with representative chips. That's all you get, or you get a big bag of chips that goes with every one of them. But the core, if you really want a good feel for what's in the subsurface, the core is the way to go. You're going to pay a boatload for it. Our core holes are running about $125 a foot. The water we used on our first hole ran us $15,000 when we were using the county water stand for our supplies. We used $114,000 worth of mud. That's on hole number 1. When the first truck showed up, we had 3 40-foot flatbed trailers show up with all of our mud supplies and polymer and everything else that we were going to use on it. I thought that was enough mud for the whole program. It didn't even last us to the end of the first hole. So that's what I knew about it. So these things get really expensive. So on a 2,500 foot hole that's running you $125 a foot, a very, very pricey proposition. And the drill rig runs us about $110,000 to $125,000 a week. So representative core. This is the stuff that's what I wanted to highlight here is, here you have dolomite in the bottom of the box that looks fairly robust. I mean, that's what we call stick drilling. If you get stick after stick after stick and fill the box with sticks, that's good drilling. Drillers love it. It's the easiest type stuff. But see in the trough just immediately above it, it's brecciated and big class, big funky stuff. Fault zone, it's getting sheared up. But next breccia up is a whole different class, whole different size. It looks like it went through a whole different pressure temperature regime, but it's immediately above this. Strange. One thing I've seen in this, and I've never seen it anywhere else, I brought up with a whole bunch of people, is breccia that has been folded. You see folded breccia in a core. And I was like, I'm not quite sure how that happens, but then you get this mush up above. And all this stuff is deeply argillized. You load it into the sample when you send it off for the assay work with a spoon. When it dries out, it dries to sand. It'll dry to either sand or a real fine powder. And so when you're drilling through this type of stuff, where the rocks are so disparate over such a short vertical distance, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And in fact, our drillers hate this project because of the drilling is so difficult. Some of the rocks though are really, really neat. Oh my gosh. So hydrogeology, I gave you some of this story about what's going on out there, but a bunch of people, if we could de-water, and the interesting thing is in the old USGS, I love this stuff, in the old USGS reports on this, they talk about unwatering the shaft. It doesn't even sound right when they read it, they would unwater it, but where everybody says de-water today, so we're going to de-water it. But the potential for ag is right there. They've talked about directional drilling where they come in off of a somewhere way, because the property holding is so big, way off the far sides and do directional drilling to get, and so the head lift wouldn't be so high vertically to get the water. One thing I want to draw is some parallels between what we do in the mining business and what other people do in the, and a lot of this was predicated on the Briac scandal that came out of Borneo. These guys were cheating. They were salting their samples with nuggets. It was supposed to be flake gold. They couldn't even cheat with the right kind of gold. They were mining in Borneo, and they kept turning the samples over to the assay. Whoa, look at these values through the roof. So at any rate, the stock price also went way up. It was a scheme, it was a scam, they were cheating. And Matthew McConaughey made a movie about it called Gold. And I like this, based on a too good to be true story. True and true. People died, people disappeared. He turns out to be the nice guy in it. He's the unwitting, all the crooks are running around the outside while he's doing this. But that's when they said, we're not going to do this way anymore. You have to have a robust quality assurance, quality control program. just like you do in environmental. In fact, percentages are even the same. In environmental, you really about 10% of your sample stream is for QA. Whether you have duplicates or replicates or trip blanks or you name it, it's about 10% of the stream. Same thing in this business. You use duplicates, you also use standards that are prepared by a lab, and blanks. You use blanks. In fact, we use marble chips for blanks because there's nothing in the marble calcium carbonate. And so they're very similar, and the proportions are the same. About 10% of our sample stream is just for QA. Environmental, depending on what you're sampling, whether it's water or soil, you get into some, but the standard kind of 8240, 8260, that's kind of how we used to back in the day. 10% of the sample stream, and you got a lot for that and cost that all in on the front end. And so where I draw parallels in the environmental business, very simple. Any property that's up for sale or somebody's wanting to lease it or change the purpose of it, they have to do a phase 1 on it, especially if a bank's going to lend money on it. So they get the environmental guy to go out there and kick the tires, look at it, where's the sumps, where's the infalls and outfalls, how's the place plumbed, what's it look like, what was it used for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they write up a very, very thorough, very comprehensive report of what is the story on that property. And they put up their hand and say, we vouch for this. We're the independent third party who says, you can lend on this, you can bulldoze this, you can do whatever for its future intended use. That's what our phase 1 report said. Or phase 1 report can also say, oh, looks like you're going to need phases 2 and 3 to get this one off the books, okay? Depending on how contaminated they are. Well, it's a very similar story in the mining business, and the reports are called NI 43101s. And NI means National Institute, and it's predicated by the Securities Exchanging in Canada. The Canadians drive the mining industry in North America. They're everywhere in Nevada. Nevada's the 4th largest producing district in the world. And I've worked for Canadian juniors for many, many, many years. It's just assumed they're either out of Toronto or Vancouver. Newmont, which is based in Denver, is one of the odd ones. But Barrick or any of the other I-80, any of the other ones that are out there, Kinross, they're all Canadians. They're all Canadians. And so the Canadian Exchange came, and here's what you must do, and you can only have qualified people prepare these reports for you. You can't go to Joe Dokes down the boulevard and say, hey, I want you to do, no. You have to have all your credentials lined out, and each one of those reports comes with a whole page of your credentials signed and stamped by you that says, I'm the real deal. This is why, and I can vouch for, and they'll specify which sections of that report they were responsible for. My cousin Eddie did these sections, Tony over here did these, Wanda did this, but very, very specific. Because you don't want it to wind up in litigation, and some of them do. And so it gave birth to a whole industry, just like the environmental business did with phase 1s. And EDR just ran off with all the databases, and they run everything. I mean, holy smokes. But they're starting up a whole new, it's really incipient now with 43101s. If you want to research a whole area, you can pull up the reports for all those mining districts or specific mines that were going into capital markets to raise money, and that's why you do these. We just finished one literally last week in 43101, and it's chock-a-block full of geology. It's very, very specific and gets right into the details, because eventually we'll do feasibility studies, model the resource that we have, prove it, take it to the markets to raise even more money, and we try and do it, $5 to $10 million at a pop. And the resource has to be there. It can't all just be happy talk and we think we saw it. That's not the way these things are structured. So planning is the same story in most of these programs. Of the big number, the overall programmatic number, planning should be about 10%. Just like I said, 10% of your sample stream should be QA, QC, 10% of your, and that goes right back to the project management planning handbook, kind of rule of thumb. We used to do this in environmental as well. But the reason I include this specifically is you have to consider the local economic, the local and national economics in what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what turnaround time is. If I want to drill a hole somewhere in Nevada right now and have a drill rig show up to do that, whether it's an RC rig or a core rig, I should have negotiated that deal last August or September. The hard backlog out there is palpable, and it's a driller's market. And so as a result, you're lucky to get them to even return your phone calls because they're so busy. And the same is the exact same truth with the analytical labs. We've used several analytical labs. ALS Chemex in Reno has outstanding personnel requisitions for 29 new hires. They just can't find people to sign up and become an employee. And so part of the planning that goes into that is we also have to be very specific about what we want to achieve with our drilling results. So you do prognoses on the front end, so you already know what you want that hole to look like, where you're going to intercept different horizons, different strata, what have you. You predict that on the front end. You know where you want to be as you're going, not just, gosh, I hope we are where we are. And so that's what prognoses are all about. And then planning the deliverables. How are these going to go into the report? Same exact thing, same thing in environmental. This is going to have to go into an RIFS report or a phase 1 or phase 2, what have you. And so that's what those look like. Thanks for paying attention. I appreciate it.
Any questions for Matt?
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Good to know you didn't learn any yet.
Oh.
I have a mic here for questions.
I have a question.
Speaking of
No,
mic, no,
I don't
mic.
want to. I'm loud enough. I'm loud enough, I promise. The NI 43101, is that North America only, or would that?
No, it's international because the
international.
Australians are doing it too. There's also a new.
Africa?
What's that?
Africa? Does that apply to Africa?
Yeah, yes. It's an international standard.
international law.
There's a new one that just came out called an SK 1300 that the U.S. Securities Exchange is trying to adopt. Well, no, they are adopting it, and so the standards are very, very similar. But there is a new U.S. standard for that. It's just now. It hasn't even been out 18 months.
And just a comment, thank you for all the education on being a CPG because I had no idea.
Okay, good.
Even I didn't.
Good. Mission accomplished.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just shout it. What's the software for the 3D visualization that?
We get that a lot. One of the guys I worked with is really into gems, and he's had it forever. But the big one is Leapfrog, and the problem with that is, I follow everything John Cowan does on LinkedIn and all that. It's really cool. They say it's the quickest way, absolutely the fastest way to model your way to the wrong solution. But it's fast.
Yeah.
And the difference between that is, I've worked on mine sites where the model is actually, if you think of the old fence diagrams, but they're like corrugated, like you would put eggs in, or a box of wine bottles comes with and so a drill hole that's oblique to those starts in one, stops, starts in another, stops, starts in another, stop. And to get a 3D image of that in your mind, it really takes some reckoning. And then when you have all these individually hung up as part of, and we were using, I'll think of it here in a minute, the modeling software just wasn't geo-friendly, but it was like something that had grown up out of AutoCAD, and that's how they were using it. Leapfrog's the hot ticket now. However, Sequent bought them, and Sequent is huge, and so I'm sure the price on that has gone, which is why QGIS is so attractive now. All the independents are using it, and it's free, and there's all kinds of Python add-ons and neat stuff you can do. Everybody has problems with cross sections, but the map view is pretty straightforward stuff, and it's fun. But yeah, Leapfrog that's what's hot. That's what's hot now. It'll be something different this time next year.
Man, I have a couple questions. For this project, what is the capital budget? 10 million, 100 million, 250 million? What is a project
Ooh,
like this? And
well,
then the second question is, how many geologists would be involved in the project?
Well, if let's say we're up and running and developing the mine, it would be, you'd have a couple of geologists that work in ore control, and they're just looking at blast holes and production for them. You'd have near mine exploration people that are working all the periphery. Then you'd have away from mine exploration team. So total in production 6 or 8, plus a senior geo and a VP of exploration, a VP geo overseeing the whole thing. 6 or 8, and then a whole slew of engineers around it.
So this is a developmental project. How long does that take? But how much is to bring that mine into production? What is the cost?
That's the question. That is the question. Our thinking is it'll probably take $30 million to bring it out of the ground. The shaft alone is timber framed, square set timber framed, and nobody builds timber framed anything anymore. So that will have to be completely rebuilt. The pumping alone will run into millions and millions. So 30 million to bring it out of the ground. 30 million to bring it so that one of the majors, we can't do that ourselves. So that one of the majors will buy it from us at a very healthy margin and put their own people on it. And that's a business model that everybody in Nevada uses. They look at the little juniors who are out there doing all the stuff, proving it through their own bits, and then they buy the project. And I've worked on several where we were just about to go belly up before Barrick stepped in and bought the project, and now we all get new trucks, you know. It's good. But stuff like that, you know. And so it can be very, it can be difficult from time to time, yeah. But not real geo-intensive. I mean, even at full tilt would be 5 or 6 stops. A lot of collective gray matter can move a lot of rock, and I will tell you, I've just been amazed. We have some real, well, I say junior because we have some geologists that work on this that are consultants to us. Oh, and I didn't give credit to GRE out of Denver, Global Resource Engineering. They did all these graphics. They're doing our 43101, and so very, very talented people. But what I've seen is the caliber of geos coming out of school right now, with the GIS talent that they have and the theses that they've done and stuff like, wow. Oh, and you should know, here's the other thing. New geologists right out of school, and you can be from SIU, Carbondale, I don't care where you come from. You can go out there right now, Northern Nevada Mines, they're hiring entry-level, walk right in, never mind a day in your life, geologist, $80K a year. Full benefits, $80,000 a year.
Bachelor's, master's, what?
Bachelor's degree. Walk right on.
What about an old dog? They hire us?
And so that it's not an easy lifestyle because they might work at 10 and 6. And those 10s are full 12 and 14-hour days. They get their pound of flesh, I can assure you. 80K sounds really impressive, but 2 years of that and you're just about, you know, to leave the country. It's just, yeah.
In terms of if it goes to production, where would they take the ore to process it and smelt it?
It's a really good point. They smelted it right in town. They had rail access. Some of it they took all the way out to California to be refined for better beneficiation. Some of it they ran up to Carlin. Carlin was just a rail junction, wasn't even a town. And then they would take it out west to Sacramento to have it refined. But nothing nearby other than the initial raw smelting. And I tell you what, because those processes were so inefficient and the recovery levels were so low, that the Archimedes pit, they came out and they mined up all that waste rock and put it right on their leach pad. And the way the leach pad, the way they mine this stuff in bulk, they put it on a big mound. It looks like a ziggurat that they're building out there. A big mound of soil that they put sprinkler systems on. It's got a big it's built on a catchment system, and they sprinkle cyanide on it, cyanide solution. It percolates down through that and entrains the gold, brings it down in what they call the pregnant pond, which is where that water flows into, that's got all the gold in it that they eventually take to refine. That technology didn't exist. So when they saw these waste rock piles, they high graded all that, they took all of it. And so that's kind of a good news, because a lot of people who give mining a hard time don't, and we did it, it was very common down in Mexico. You'd go to all those old Spanish workings and everything else, you take all that waste rock. You want all of it. Somebody's already brought it to the surface for you. So, I mean, and so you can leach it that way, and it's just, it's environmentally much more practicable, and to the extent that you can recover as much as you can from what somebody else's waste is now your resource.
So do you lease the land and lease the groundwater rights, or do you outright own them?
We own them. We're on patented ground, so we don't have to interact with the BLM at all. We own the water.
NPDES?
I'm sorry?
No NPDES permit?
No, none of that. None of that. But see, the problem is, we're only using it for exploration purposes. Once we start putting it into a mill or something else, the regs go through the roof.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of small environmental consulting firms out of Reno that are helping us with that. Right now, they haven't had a whole lot of work, but feasibility or pre-feasibility study-wise, they'll have to get into the mix. It becomes a big deal once you get water interacting with sulfides.
Yeah.
big deal.
I have a question. So, I guess over the past 20 years, have you seen much progress, like horizontal drilling? I know you had mentioned like directional drilling for like the dewatering.
Well,
as far as like for the exploration phase.
Not where we are, and we're real anomalous. In fact, you look at even an air photo of Nevada, like there's Eureka. Why? Because out in the desert they've got a surplus of water, and we're in a very finite catchment. The issue that we have with the mine is, I'll get shot for saying this out loud. We need to dewater that mine to a level that's below what's out in the valley, so we would have water coming to us. So then we would end up creating an additional problem with moving that water. But the farmers want all that water they can possibly have. And so there are other places in the state, yes, where that has become, it's wag the dog. I mean, it's a big deal. Anywhere west of Salina, Kansas, I mean, water gets to be a big deal very quickly. But we already know a bunch of people will be interested in that. Right. We don't have to get our water from the county now, Eureka County. We get it from the adjoining mining operation. And so we're not paying for it, which works out well for us because that mine's in care and maintenance. They're not actively mining. But those numbers could go upside down on us very quickly. And we're really sensitive to them. Water's a big deal.
Matt, I've got a question on, you mentioned early on structurally, in Nevada, east-west stretching, thinning of the crust. Did you see evidence out there of Brahmin formation?
Oh, yeah.
So are those targets?
We have there's a problem with the strat column out there that nobody for sure knows how thick the units really are, because in some places you can't find the bottom, or it doesn't outcrop anywhere, or in some places it'll have an imbricate system that went right through it. Now it's 3 times as thick as it should be, or it's only 1/3 as thick as it is the next range over. And so there's real problems with that. But yeah, there are. There's a whole series of them out there that are connected grubbins that are associated with that. And the thrust systems underlie the whole ridge. In fact, the thrust systems outcrop on the east side several miles over from where we are. It's kind of weird to read about it, that, and that's what has our strat column kind of reversed in some places. The stuff that they're mining out in the valley is stratigraphically much higher in this section than the stuff is up on the hill above us, and so the column's reversed. And it's just how it is. And I had thought, I grew up in this part of the world. I grew up out here on the Craton, and stratigraphy, how tough can that be, right? Oldest rocks are at the bottom, youngest are on top. Well, okay, that's, but out here, once they've shuffled the deck a few times, and they folded it over, and check that out. That's not where it's supposed to be. And in fact, we had one where we had two drill holes that we colored on the same pad. There were like one's at 355, the other's at 175 on their azimuth. One went through about 150 feet of lithic tuff. There's a tuff out there of a Miocene lithic tuff. The other hole didn't encounter it at all, and it's like right there. And we knew there's a fault that goes through the Jackson Fault. We knew we were right on it. The tuff filled in topographic lows, and that's why it was there, but not on the must have been a topographic high where we didn't get it at all. And I'd never even seen it. Well, I'd seen tuffs before, and I've logged a lot of volcanics, but I'm like, what is this? I mean, I didn't. So I just said, I'm just going to call it lithic tuff. I don't know what it is. I'm going to call it lithic tuff. I looked it up. It's the Pinto Summit lithic tuff. I had no clue that, I got that one lucky. But I just never had logged a tuff before. There's a lot of it out there. A lot of it out there. That particular tuff, they cut dimension stone out of. They were using it foundation blocks and all kinds of stuff out there.
Well, we've got time for one more question. Anybody have a question?
Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody for joining us tonight as well, and we'll keep you informed on the next meeting.
Awesome job.
Thank you very much.
Emily.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you coming.
I really liked the entire presentation.
Yeah.